Welcome to Greater Life Church Elements class. Today we're on module 4.1, which is about the temple of God. And we're on part 2, which is separated apart unto God or separated from the world. Now we're going to go to page 8 and let's read our purpose statement. It says, our motivation for holiness must be God's command to be holy and our desire to be closer to Him. And as we separate ourselves from the world, our heart and mind will cleave even closer to Him. The fill-in-the-blank words for this purpose statement is command, desire, and cleave, in case you missed it. Now we're going to go to 2 Corinthians 6, verses 16 through 18. I'm going to read that, and then we'll go to 2 Corinthians 7 and 1. Okay, 2 Corinthians 6, verses 16 through 18 reads, And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God, as God hath said, I will dwell in them, and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Wherefore, come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. And will be a father unto you, and ye shall be my sons and daughters, saith the Lord Almighty. Now in 2 Corinthians 7:1, it says, Having therefore these promises, dearly beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit, perfecting holiness in the fear of God. Now we'll go on to the questions in our study guide. Question number 1 tells us, or asks this question, what did the Lord instruct us not to do in 2 Corinthians 6:17? Well, that was to touch not the unclean thing. Question number 2, what 2 things should we cleanse ourselves from in 2 Corinthians 7:1? Well, that's the filthiness of the flesh and the spirit. Question number 3, how can holiness be perfected in a person's life? Well, I believe that this holiness can be perfected by living a life that is separated from the worldly thinking and acting and from the worldly pleasures of this life. We have to be careful to conduct ourselves as Christians. We must put on the new man, and we must think and act in a Christ-like manner. In 2 Corinthians 7:1, Paul says, therefore, having these promises. This is Paul's way in bringing to conclusion 2 Corinthians 6, verses 14 through 18, because he talks about not being unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? What communion hath light with darkness? And what concord hath Christ with Belial? And what part hath he that believeth with an infidel? And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God. As God hath said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Wherefore come out from among them and be separate, saith the Lord. Touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. And I will be a father unto you, and ye shall be my sons and daughters, saith the Lord Almighty. Well, in all of these verses, Paul wrote about the need to separate ourselves from worldly influences so we can live a closer life with God. Now, the concept of separating ourselves from the world must start with the idea that we want to separate ourselves unto God. You know, if we love Him, we would want to be like Him. He is holy, so we are holy. In other words, we want to get closer to God rather than getting closer to the world. Now, if we focus on getting closer to God, then we will naturally be more separate from the world. Here's God, and over here's the world, and as we travel closer to God, we're further away from the world. So this command to come out from among them and be separate in 2 Chronicles 6:17 is coupled with a promise in verse 18 where he says, I will receive you, and I will be a father to you, and ye shall be my sons and my daughters. So Paul is helping us to understand that there's a spiritual principle that if we separate ourselves from worldly thinking and acting and draw closer to God, then we are promised a closer relationship with God. This makes a lot of sense. And why is that? Well, it's because you think about the world, when you think about it, and its ideology, the world's morality, when you think about all those things, it's opposed to God's ways and his morality. It's like a 180-degree turn from God's morality. So it makes sense that the closer we get to God, it means we are getting further away from the world. So becoming separated unto God necessarily means that we become separated more from the world's morality and lifestyle. So the concept of holiness from a biblical view simply means that we separate ourselves from the world and consecrate ourselves unto God. So to be separated from the world doesn't mean that we have become isolated from the world or we never engage in this world. No, this separation involves our values and principles we live by. And we show the separation by how we live our lives in front of the whole world. We promote wholesome family lifestyle. We promote godly morality. We promote love and kindness. We promote all the godly principles that God has given us in front of all the world. We are in this world, but we are not of this world. We are in this world, but we don't practice all the practices and lifestyle of the world. We don't practice lustful, hurtful, or immoral worldly lifestyle. We practice a godly lifestyle. So in order to facilitate this separation in our lives, we must first disconnect or separate ourselves from all the sinful influences from our past and from this world that we're at odds with the moral principles of God. And then secondly, we must join ourselves to God's values and embrace his morality, which allows us to pursue his purpose for our lives in a separated lifestyle unto him. Now, this simply means that we must grow closer to God. You see, it's impossible to live out the purposes of God if we're not living a life that is set apart for God. If we are not separated from worldly influences, then we cannot live a life that is set apart for God and thereby get closer to God. Instead, we'll end up getting closer to the world and become more contaminated again by the world. We separate ourselves from worldly influences in order to get closer to God. Our separation is not some badge of honor that gains us salvation or favor with God. And no, our separation must always be about getting a closer relationship with God. Our separation is a demonstration of our faith in God and of our love for God. It is vital we understand this concept, or we may find ourselves pursuing holiness with the wrong motivation, and this can lead to legalism. Legalism is pursuing separation for the purpose of gaining salvation or some kind of badge of honor to ourselves, or we pursue separation as though it would gain some kind of favor with God. As Christians, we must be set apart unto God, and then our closeness to him produces the separation from the world that keeps us from all of its influences. Now, being set apart unto God indicates a choice and intention to get closer to him. It indicates how much we love God. If we love God, then we will obey God. However, being set apart from the world, does not necessarily indicate we desire to be more like Christ. In truth, we set the cart before the horse if we pursue separation from the world without first pursuing separation unto God. When our attitude is to pursue separation unto God because we want to please him and we want to be close to him, then we will find ourselves naturally separating from the world for the right reason. We are saved by grace through faith, according to Ephesians 2, verses 8 through 10. For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, and not of works, lest any man should boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works, which God hath before ordained that we should walk in them. Now, note that it says we are saved by grace through faith. It is the gift of God, not of our own works. Now, works didn't bring us his grace. Instead, works follow because of his grace in our life. Many times people leave out verse 10, which states that because we are his workmanship and created in Christ Jesus to do good works, that we are ordained to walk in his good works. But that's as a result of receiving his grace and his salvation in our life. So I like how the International Standard Version expresses verse 10. It says this: "For we are God's masterpiece, created in Messiah Jesus to perform good actions that God prepared long ago to be our way of life. So our good works, Christ-like actions, which include our lifestyle, should be our way of life. It is ordained of God. This separated lifestyle is ordained of God. So we must be careful that the pursuit of separation from the world does not lead us into legalism and rule making in order to be saved. No, we're saved by grace first, but because of his grace working in us, it will show itself in works. Instead, separation unto God is more about pleasing him and embracing the principles that mirror his holiness, which helps us to draw closer to him. That's why the scripture admonished us to be holy, for he is holy. Our motivation for the purposes of holiness must be rooted in our desire to be more Christ-like and not more church-like, if you catch my drift. In other words, it's not about trying to look holy on the outside without first having an inward desire to be Christ-like. We must wash the inside of the cup so that the outside of the cup will be washed too. It has to start inwardly first. Our intentions of separation from the world first must be about pleasing our God, pleasing the Lord. And when we move toward pleasing God in our lifestyle, then necessarily we move away from worldliness and the world's lifestyle, and we move into Christ-like behavior. Again, separation from the world does not necessarily mean that one is getting closer to God in relationship, especially if the intention is legalistic, to wear some badge of honor, However, when we set ourselves apart in order to get closer to Jesus, then necessarily it means we will separate ourselves from the worldly influences and the practices of this world. It's all about intentions. Our separation must first be about our love for God, our desire to get close to him and to live for him and to be holy like he is holy. So I've run out of time for this portion, this session, but we're going to get into next week a little bit more about what it means to be set apart unto God for a purpose. That will be part 3. I want to thank you for watching. Be blessed in the Lord as you learn how to live a life that is pleasing to God, and we'll see you next week.